Community and Wellbeing Officer. The Community and Wellbeing Officer represents students on issues affecting their well-being, such as health, finance, accommodation and security, as well as wider community issues. The Community and Wellbeing Officer is key to ensuring that students from a range of backgrounds and minority groups are represented within the university. They also ensure that students are represented fairly within the local community, liaising with both town and parish council officials.
Hello everyone, I'm Izzie and I'm joined by Kelly Balmer, who is running to be your Community and Wellbeing Officer this academic year. So Kelly, very nice broad question. Why have you decided to run for Community and Wellbeing Officer?
So I've decided to run for Community and Wellbeing Officer because I love York. I think it's a fantastic place, but I have become quite disheartened by the issues that students face. There's so many that they face, and they kind of are summarised in my manifesto. Anything from kind of sexual violence, student safety, accommodation, finances, it's all things that directly affect the student experience. And I feel like to have an opportunity to try and fix some of them and work to improve that student experience would be an absolute honour, which is why I've decided to run.
Ah, that is amazing. So obviously you've previously been part of USU as a policy coordinator, you just mentioned. So has that also inspired your decision to continue the time in the SU?
Yes, so for anyone who's met me during my time kind of working as a policy coordinator, obviously the role no longer exists anymore, but I'm really passionate about student experience and making sure that students have an opportunity to say what they think, and then that it's acted on in a really positive and productive and kind of expressive way, which I feel like is something that I would definitely bring to the role of being a community and wellbeing SAB, is really listening to students and helping them enact in a positive way to get what they want, basically.
And you mentioned briefly before, and also your wellbeing manifesto outlines this, it's the need to address the issues surrounding sexual violence within the university. What are your plans for dealing with that issue?
So yeah, I think it would be to seek a review of policies and procedures and the support in place that there is for students. Although this is kind of going on at the moment, I think really building upon that and making sure that any suggestions made by students are really implemented and pushing for those changes that students ask for to be made. Working with the university productively to do that would also be really vital. But I think the kind of topic of sexual violence need to be looked at not just at the university level, but also within USU and kind of the culture that there is within the student community. Although I think that's been improving over the past year or so, I think to continue pushing that would be a really key thing that I'd love to do.
Yeah. And then obviously moving forward into this academic year, you've outlined you've got plans to work with Unity Health and the Open Door scheme. Could you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I feel like when it comes to Unity Health, it's a case of really pushing them to improve their service still. But I also think we're now in the position where we can advertise other doctor surgeries to students. That kind of contract has kind of changed. So I think telling students there's other options than Unity Health and expressing to Unity Health that because of the history it has with dealing with students so negatively, it's really influenced students not to go there, and that they need to kind of pull their finger out a little bit and act on themselves, hold themselves accountable, I suppose. And with Open Door and the reporting process is kind of tie into that. So what I think a lot of these services and provisions that the university provide lack is student feedback. There seems to be a severe lack in feedback structures. So although the student union is here to push and fight for change for students, there isn't some kind of structure in place. So once you've finished a reporting process at York, once you've finished your 4 counselling sessions at Open Door, there isn't a, how did you find this? Where could we have done better? Could we have signposted you to more longer term support a bit more easier? You know, there's none of those conversations happening between students and staff. And I think that's where the real barrier is for a lot of the student experience, because the staff just, you know, they want to know, they just don't know what students are experiencing. And I think that is really where I want to focus on that.
And how do you want to implement things like that? Is that through sort of an online process or a written feedback process?
So I think everything's online at the moment, but I would see it being some kind of email that you receive after using a university provision, after using a reporting process, after going to Student Hub to get access on your landlord requirements, because, you know, landlords be landlords. You know, I think having some kind of email back from the student can ignore it if they want to, but I think you'll find that if students have something to say and they do think that something can improve, they would say it. And I think that's been something that I found in kind of the work that I've been doing across the uni over the past few years.
And you mentioned the dreaded word landlords. Student finance is a huge issue which has impacted many students, especially under, you know, the recent circumstances with the pandemic. What do you hope to achieve for students who are struggling with their funds?
So I would really like to push for a national review of student finance. I believe Effie was doing some work on this before she left. She was the Community and Wellbeing SAB just before Carly. And I think really pushing on the student finance on a national way, being like, actually what you're giving students isn't enough because landlords are capping their rent as high as they can. And then also really addressing the issue of landlords to highlight the implications that charging so much for rent have on student experience and on student funds and on their well-being. Because if you struggle for finances, you're going to have to work on top of your degree, which damages your academic studies and has a knock-on effect to your well-being and everything. So I think really pushing what students are up against, as well as working on a national level to change that, as well as working with the university to improve the way that they're running their hardship funds and the extra support funds that they've been running throughout COVID, kind of looking at it holistically and looking at a long-term plan to improve this, as well as looking at the more short-term grants that students are able to access.
And then obviously, as well as support is a huge factor of the community and the wellbeing position, there's also the sort of side of safety. What are your plans for making York a safe and supportive environment for students? I know you've mentioned things like working with venues, but what sort of plans do you have in place for things like that?
So a range of things. I think working with venues both in city centre, on the outskirts and within USU to get things like Good Night Out properly implemented in student bars and properly implemented across city centre. Because if you have one consistent thing like Good Night Out across the whole thing, then everyone knows it's there. And it's not like, oh, who uses what method? What bar am I at? Oh, you know, you don't get that confusion with it. I think ensuring that more efficient training is done as well across campus venues, as well as working with the venues in town to help them understand the needs that students have on nights out and how a student night out is different to an in-town night out, how students might still go to that and the issues they occur with that. And I think COVID gives us a really good blank slate to come back and have all of that kind of starting to be addressed as things open back up again. So I think that would be quite helpful. I think as well, advertising things like Streamline, do a taxi service where you can give your student ID number. If you have no cash, you can still get home safely and just pay it at a later time. From what I've heard, that's only for those on student accommodation. Looking to do that for students who are off campus accommodation as well, I think would be something that I'd be quite interested in addressing. You know, there's such a range of things you could do to address the issue of student safety.
So you've mentioned quite a wide range of, you know, things you're hoping to work on there. What's your biggest goal for the year? What's the thing that you want to work on the most?
I think the feedback structures. I feel like that might be the magic spell for a lot of the issues that students are up against at York. I think building in structured feedback services and making sure that the uni's actually acting on what students are saying and making sure that USU are responding as well to those structured feedbacks and holding the university accountable through them. I think that's the magic key, opening up that direct student dialogue between the uni and making it a regular and structured thing. So I'd say that would be one of my key things I really look forward to, because I think that addresses so many issues. It will help with accommodation, communication on sexual violence issues, on financial difficulties, on student safety, you name it, and there's an opportunity for students to say their concerns.
And very briefly, why do you think that you're the right person to implement all of this?
Because I've got quite a background in working with policy and working in different organisations. I think as well, I'm just really passionate about student experience. I think students deserve so much better than they're getting. And I feel like my passion and drive to kind of implement all of my ideas is just what's going to make me a really good fit for this role. And like, please elect me. 'Cause I'm really passionate about this. I really can.
So unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. But I'd like to thank Kelly for talking to us today. And I'm going to pass over very soon to Brooke Davis with another Women and Non-Binary Officer interview now.